What is up, Steelers Nation? Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Streckbein, joined always by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talker. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Mason Rudolph saved the holidays and maybe the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. George Pickens, man, you want to quiet the haters. You go do what George Pickens did in the Pittsburgh Steelers playoff hopes. Maybe they rose a little bit. We'll dive into all of it, some crushing injuries, some major wins, and a team that finally found some life on both sides of the football in Week 16 against the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, first off, my man, Merry Christmas. How are we feeling?
Merry Christmas. Feeling good. I feel like I'm still in shock. Like I really don't know what I just watched. Like, I mean, you only have to go back to look at my score prediction from our last episode to know that I did not see this coming in the slightest, at all. Like, I maybe could have told you that Jake Browning would throw multiple interceptions. I didn't tell you that Mason Rudolph would throw for damn near 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. I didn't tell you I couldn't have told you George Pickens would have the kind of game he had.
Yes.
I'm going through my notes, thinking I'm watching that game, first of all, in shock, but then I'm going through my notes thinking yeah, that happened too. And this different thing, there were just so many moments where I felt this, just up and down the roster, different guys gave you such incredible moments that you felt like, man, that was exemplifying, this win, that exemplified this win. That was a huge part of it. It was a really fun game to watch. And just I heard people in the post-game press conferences using the word cathartic a lot. And that's really what it seemed like it was.
Yeah, 100%. This was, I don't know, there was just something about it. I wanted to ask everybody after the game. I did ask a couple of players, just how fun was this? How was this? This felt like the first game, even in the press box. I kept saying it to Chris Carter, who sits next to me. Dude, this is fun. This is a good time. This is a good football game to watch. This is the first time all season where you're sitting here. There's no panic button. There's no stress. It's just an enjoyable time. I had a couple of buddies who were at the game, and they were texting me beforehand. They texted me the night before, midnight. They're like, I said, screw it, and bought some tickets to this game. We'll see what happens. Hopefully Mason Rudolph doesn't throw 10 interceptions. And I'm like, yeah, well, best of luck, And then they were texting me through it, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And I was like, dude, this is the best game you could have picked ever. And it was thanks to George Pickens, like you said, thanks to Mason Rudolph, thanks to Eric Rowe and Patrick Peterson playing safety. I mean, some major names that you would never expect to create the dominance that the Pittsburgh Steelers came up with. Obviously, we got to start with Mason Rudolph, star of the show, guy who first start since 2021, first time in 3 years that he had a full week's worth of practice to prepare and be ready to go for a football game. Walks out there, completes, what's the number? 17 of 27 passes, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns. At the end of the first quarter, he had 130 yards and a perfect passer rating on top of a touchdown. Second play of the game goes 86 yards to George Pickens. I mean, Mason Rudolph, man, this was the best showing that the Pittsburgh Steelers have seen at quarterback all season, I believe. You're watching that game. What are your thoughts? How hyped, how into Mason Rudolph are you during this one?
Well, I think the first thing I thought was just kind of good for Mason Rudolph. I think this is,
yes.
People who've watched this show for going back to, when I started doing this with you a year and a half ago. We always kind of felt like Mason got a little bit of a raw deal. I mean, it's it's all relative given that the guy was making, 6 figures to $1 million while he was doing it, or to $3 million while he was doing it. But you just never felt like he got a real fair shake. And this time he finally gets an opportunity, and he made the absolute most of it. He was everything that, his biggest supporters said that he could be. He was accurate on the deep ball. He made good decisions. He was surprisingly mobile. There were a couple times where he slid around in the pocket to create some more time for himself, threw at a funky arm angle to get a completion off. He was just smart and accurate and confident. And he was just, it was just a good story. I mean, forget what's going to happen next week. Forget about the playoff odds. Forget about literally everything else surrounding this team. You remove the you kind of remove all the rest of those circumstances and you just watch a guy who had his back against the wall, a guy who said in his post-game press conference, I didn't know if I was going to have to go back to like selling insurance or whatever,
Yeah.
or something, or selling retail. Like he felt like he had one shot. He had one more shot, and he made the absolute most of it. And that's why you watch football. That's why you watch sports. That's why you do anything in life, is just to see stories like this. So I think that was my first thought. And then I don't know, like this, like you alluded to, this was the best quarterback showing the Pittsburgh Steelers have had all season. Full stop. Like no one on this roster has played a better game than Mason Rudolph did just now. And I think you're only left with the thought of like, why not ride the hot hand? I mean,
Yes.
you're back against the wall anyway. Like your playoff odds are dwindling. Like you don't have time to test this out. Like assuming Kenny Pickett's back healthy, I don't think you can afford to really. I don't know. I just don't think you can afford to go anywhere else. I think it's got to be Mason Rudolph until he shows you that this isn't who he is. Because right now this is who he is, and he in one start with the same supporting cast, we've kind of had the same common denominators except for the quarterbacks, and Mason, I think, deserves at the very least a shot to start next week.
Yeah, I agree. From start to finish of that, I agree 100%. Mason Rudolph, this is the story you were looking for. We've said it time and time again. Mason kind of getting screwed over by the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're doing everything in their power to give up on this guy and to move on from this guy. Nobody signs him in free agency. He comes back. He sits around all season. Mitch stinks. Like, let's be honest. Mitch has bad performance, steps in, has bad performance. The Steelers are like, nope, that's our guy. That's our number 2. That's who we're sticking with. He gets benched. Mason comes in here, does what Mason Rudolph does. And it was awesome. Like, it was great to see. It was the energy of it. At one point, everybody was singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, in the stadium. That was a moment that was crazy. I'm glad he got to experience it. I'm glad that he got that moment. And just like you said, like, he looked like the most poised quarterback that the Steelers have had in a long time. He looked like a guy who was a veteran. He looked like a guy who wasn't rattled. It was a guy with his back up against the wall, but it was a guy who was so calm and so collected, and so, like, the presence there was something that the Pittsburgh Steelers have not seen before. They haven't seen it in Mitch. They haven't seen it in Kenny. It hasn't been here since Ben left. And that was a quarterback who is confident in what he's able to do, who is quick with his decisions, who fully understands what's going on and where people will be and what he needs to do as a quarterback. He just looked like a veteran. Like, it was crazy. It looked like a guy who fully understood how to play quarterback and was not rattled by the moment at all. And then you say, just like you said, the mobility. I mean, you're in the red zone at that one drive, and Mason looks one way, nothing. Looks another way, nothing. Tucks it, jukes a guy out, and dives for the first down while getting clobbered by like 3 guys. That's a veteran play right there. That is, I'm not going to compare him to Big Ben, but the Steelers haven't seen that since Big Ben, and that's something that they desperately needed. And you can't go back. I think that's the biggest thing right now is you can't change quarterbacks. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're fighting with every ounce you have left to try and climb your way back into the postseason. Even if Kenny is your future, Mason is right now. He is your guy until he gets benched. And I think there's going to be people who are going to say, well, you can't play Russian roulette until the gun goes off. You can't sit here and say, oh, well, we'll ride Mason until Mason screws up, and then you got to toss Kenny back in there mid-game. You're going to screw with Kenny's confidence. I've heard all of them already. I don't think I agree with any of that. I think you ride with Mason because if Kenny looked great before he got hurt, there's an argument. But there's not an argument because we were talking about Kenny getting benched before he injured his ankle. Mason goes in here and he looks as good as he does. I don't even think there's a question. Like, I get Mike Tomlin said, we'll wait and see. I think everybody's already decided Mason's the guy until it's no longer Mason's job.
Yeah. And I kind of don't know what the argument for Kenny would be. I mean, I get it. He was a starter. I get it. Like, but he's played the same Bengals team. I guess,
Yep.
DJ Reader, that definitely changed things, but like,
yeah. And he looked good against the Bengals, but it doesn't. Nobody's looked this good. Nobody has looked as good as Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, nobody's had this kind of connection with George Pickens, who's obviously your best player. I mean,
Yes.
like Kenny hasn't shown that kind of pocket presence. I mean, it's just I don't know. I think Kenny, like I think you hit it on the head. Like Kenny can still be your future, but Mason's got to be your present right now.
Yep.
I think you gotta. He has earned it. Like he literally earned it on the field. You know, he
Yes.
earned the chance to play again next week on the field, and I think that's all it comes down to. And I don't think you can read any more into. Oh well, like if you're gonna if Kenny's confidence is gonna get ruined by someone else playing well, I mean that's on Kenny, quite honestly. Like I
Yeah.
don't really worry about that. Like Mason has played his way into a starting job after this game, so I completely agree. Just don't think you can go back. I don't think you can look back and just let Mason earn this, man. Like Mason has earned this. Just let him have it. Like
That's what I'm
it's not
saying.
even like it's just not a question in my mind.
Do you think there's a possibility? Do you think there's anything out there where these last 3 games could put Mason in the spot to be like in contention, in consideration to be the guy moving forward? You think, like, what do you? I know that that's a long shot. I know a lot of people are going to say, it's 1 game, dude, slow it down. Well, we got to talk about it because if Kenny is not a guarantee, if people are not totally sold on Kenny Pickett, you're going to look for other options. Do you think Mason balls out these last 3 games? He's an option.
Yeah, he has to be. I mean, like the results are the results. Like if he puts a similar, like he doesn't even have to play this well
No.
to I think be in consideration for a guy who could come back, not just come back next year, but even kind of be in that early conversation. Like we can still kind of acknowledge Kenny's the future. They drafted Kenny for a reason. It's
Yeah.
only 1 game for Mason, so you got to take that all into consideration. But like there'll be room for him. Like I don't think Mitch Trubisky is coming back. I don't think he's
No.
earned a roster spot again or anything like that. So I think you can be perfectly comfortable with the idea that Mason can play his way into consideration. Obviously 1 game, he's earned right now maybe one more start, like I've said, but as long as you see more from him, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't bring back a guy who's going to be relatively cheap and a guy who can clearly give you a little bit of juice on offense, has a great connection with the rest of the receivers, has a command of the offense. Like, yeah, I think he absolutely can play his way into consideration going into next year.
I agree. I think, like, look around the league. Look at the teams who have done this before. You know what I mean? The San Francisco 49ers are the new example that everybody wants to use. And I'm not trying to say Mason Rudolph is Brock Purdy. I'm not even coming close to that comparison. What I'm saying is that you should not hold yourself to a certain player just because. Hey, well, we took him in the first round. If Kenny was the first overall pick, cool. Okay. Look, this is a totally different conversation. You're sitting there and you're going, look, you got to give him everything you got because of what you did. No, he was the 20th pick in the draft. Like, you sit around and you just look at Kenny Pickett and go, yeah, that was a good draft pick, but a lot of guys are busts at 20. A lot of guys get replaced at 20. And I'm not saying Kenny's a bust. I'm just saying that you pick the best quarterback that you have. If Mason Rudolph turns into that best quarterback, awesome. I know some people, I have talked to, some people, and I've even talked to people outside of Mark Caboli, who is Mason's biggest fan, who believe that Mason has all the tools and the experience, and he's grown so much since when he first got here that he could be that guy. And I brought it up in my walk over before the game. Like, I was going back and I was looking at rosters, and I was even looking up a little bit of Mason Rudolph highlights the couple days that followed beforehand. And what I realized is a couple of things. For one, offensive line kind of coming to the end, near the end, are when Mason Rudolph was stepping into place. Two, the last time he was like a full-blown starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Deontay Johnson was a rookie, a third-round rookie. Juju Smith-Schuster was his wide receiver 1, and he was banged up half the season with a knee injury. And then his wide receiver 2 was supposed to be Dante Moncrief, who you were not around for the Dante Moncrief era, but there will be people who remember that. That was probably the worst wide receiver performance of all time. I don't remember how many games that guy lasted, but he didn't last a whole season. They signed him to be the number 2. He dropped so many passes in like the first 6-7 games of the season that they were just like, he's done, dude. He cannot. They didn't even bench him. They just cut him. They said he can't be here anymore. So he had nobody going on. He didn't have a tight end. I'm almost positive that his tight end for half the season was Nick Vannett, who most people won't even remember who that is. James Conner was his running back, but he was banged up most of the season. So it was a combination of Benny Snell and Jalen Samuels. Just, not the best group of guys. So if you want to test him now, you want to see what he's got with some real talent. Who knows? Maybe Mason is the dude for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe all he needs is to be 28 years old and to finally get a shot with some real guys. Guys, we have gear, new merchandise from AST to Mooth, Bleed Black and Gold, Kenny to George, and plenty of others now at our new website, blackandgoldapparel.com. And the coolest part, 50% of all profits at our store go to UPMC Children's Hospital here in Pittsburgh to make sure that we are giving back. We can't thank you guys enough, and we want to show you guys how thankful and how grateful we are for everything by making sure that we do our part to make the community here in Pittsburgh better. Go check out everything. We tried to make everything new and improved, from our designs to our quality of sweatshirts and t-shirts and everything else. Let us know and check everything out at blackandgoldapparel.com. And as always, thank you guys for everything. Speaking of some real talent, George Pickens goes off against the Cincinnati Bengals. Took him 2 plays for everybody to shut the hell up about bagging on George Pickens and saying, oh, well, they should probably bench him and he should be punished. 2 plays. Took 2 plays for that conversation to end. And don't get me wrong, I was the biggest George Pickens critic all week long. I stand by everything I said. I think everybody who said things stood by what they said. But sometimes Mike Tomlin wins in the, maybe he made the wrong choice. And this time is a pure example of Tomlin took a risk, didn't really look good as a PR standpoint when it happened, looked fantastic about a minute and a half into the game. Shout out George Pickens. He finishes the game with 4 receptions, 195 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Went 86 yards, 2 plays into their opening drive. I mean, I just want to ask the question: how ridiculous is this guy? How talented is George Pickens? And I mean, I think it's clear as day. Mike Tomlin probably made the right move not to bench him.
Yeah, I mean, look, like 4 receptions for 195 yards. That's 48.8 yards per reception. He ate up half the field every time he touched the ball. Like,
yes,
that is absurd. And he got, only targeted 6 times, but caught 4 of them. Like, he was a one-man wrecking crew. Just the kind of guy that we had been waiting for, kind of guy that I thought he could be when I wrote about him in training camp. And I was asking people, like, this guy looks like a superstar. Do you think that he can be a superstar? And everyone told me yes, unequivocally. And, I thought he could be that. And I was right there with you thinking, like, I was bagging on George Pickens as well. And like you said, I stand by everything I said. I don't think it changes much, but because no one ever said that he was a bad player. Like, that was never the conversation. And I think George just kind of proved that once he is motivated, once he is able to kind of be who he is, once he does kind of lock in and is able to stay focused and stay on his work, he is capable of things like this all the time. He is capable of being this kind of player all the time. And I'm just excited to see kind of what the next, what is the next challenge that he's going to face? When's the next time that he's going to get frustrated? When will things not go his way? Is he going to remember this moment? Is he going to be able to say, yeah, this stuff happens, but I can play through it and I can be great despite it? Because I think when we're going to start to see his potential fully get unlocked. And so I applaud him for being able to work through that stuff. And, I think we're going to look back on this maybe, if he continues kind of on this trajectory, like Mason, he doesn't have to play this well every week to impress you. But if he can kind of keep plugging along, kind of be the same guy, then we're going to look back on these moments that we've had this season where we've been critical of George, and we're going to be like, those were a bump in the road, He really had to go through those to learn who he was and what he needs to do to be a professional. And we're going to forget about it all real soon if he continues to do things like this. So I think I walk away just more excited than anything else about what George Pickens can be.
Yeah. I said it, I want to say Friday in my to-go. I said, the to-go was about, hey, I think Mike Tomlin's taking a giant risk here. I think this could come back to bite him in the butt. I think this could look absolutely terrible for him to blatantly admit George Pickens is very much so a work in progress, that he does have maturity issues, that they are meeting to kind of correct it and improve his professionalism, and to just say, hey, look, he's so talented, you got to put him out there, could come back to bite you in the ass. That being said, somebody tweeted out, I believe it was Will Graves of the AP, tweeted out a quote from Marquise Pouncey during the game, and it was, Mike Tomlin treats everybody the same, doesn't handle everybody the same. And what he meant by that is, back in the day, it was a okay or an average player wasn't getting away with what Antonio Brown was getting away with. And I think now it means an okay or an average player isn't getting away with what George Pickens is going to get away with. And I don't think that can get out of hand. And I think it could very much so cross a line and get out of hand depending on how quickly everything escalates. But at the same time, sometimes you got to look at a guy and say, you are so damn talented that we have to work through the issues, and I got to take a shot that I will be able to work through those issues without disciplining you. And I mean, if it works, just like it worked in this one, you look like a genius, and you look like Mike Tomlin. You look like a future Hall of Fame coach who could do things that most coaches cannot do. And it works out. Sometimes it's not gonna, and I am still a little bit worried. You know, George Pickens comes out after the press conference or after the crazy game. He brings up that he kept receipts. He doesn't really apologize. He just kind of says, I know that I ticked some people off. I wouldn't say it was the worst press conference. I think he handled it very well and answered questions very well and wanted to move on, but at the same time, you know, kind of had some digs in there that to a degree worry you. And again, I think for right now, it's all in the past. I would like it to go away. I think the Steelers would like it to go away. And I think George Pickens would like it to go away. And I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt here. That week has come and gone. It is what it is. And if Mike Tomlin could keep this on a clear course, I mean, he looks like a genius at the end of it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, look, this is the NFL. This isn't like elementary school. You know, like as much as they want to talk about how they're invested in professional development, and I believe they are to a certain extent. As long as he's playing well, you can live with a lot of stuff. And I think one of the things you can live with is George keeping a kind of chip on his shoulder. I think that was one of the big things. Like, a lot of stuff has gone right for George in his life. He's been a really talented guy. He's been arguably the most talented guy on the field just about everywhere that he's played football before. And so I think kind of putting a chip on his shoulder maybe helped him a little bit, you know, maybe convincing him that people didn't believe in him, that thought that he was going to fail. Like, I genuinely believe that kind of helped him a little bit. So I think that's part of why they're not exactly checking every word he says. I think that's why they maybe don't mind when he says, you know, I've kept receipts when he feels like he still is being slighted by certain people, and then goes out and does something like he did today. I don't think anyone needs him to be an angel, be a perfect person. There are levels to it. And like Antonio Brown, like you can put up with a lot when a guy is dominating in the way that George did. So, you know, there's a fine line, and it's really kind of all about where the team stands and where Mike Tomlin stands with who George Pickens is and how much kind of these personal issues, like how much does it take before it spills over into the play, you know?
Yes.
And that was, I think, the issue with the blocking thing. It wasn't that George was frustrated. It was that he was letting those frustrations affect what he was doing on the field.
Yep.
He might have still been pissed off today. Like, he definitely was, but what do I mean might have? He was definitely still pissed off today. But he used it as fuel. He used it productively. He channeled it productively instead of letting it kind of detract from his play. And I think that was the big difference. And I think that's the sweet spot with George, is you let him be pissed off a little bit. You let him have a chip on his shoulder. And as long as it's not taking away from his game, as long as it's adding to it, you obviously can live with that.
Agreed. 100% agreed. On the other side of the positive news is some very negative news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Landon Roberts goes down with a pectoral injury. He's the last starting linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Doesn't look good. His season's probably over. how massive, I mean, we've gone through this 3 times. This is the worst one, I believe, because you're out of options. How massive of a loss is this? And did you see enough out of Miles Jack, I would say? Michael Walker gives up a huge touchdown to T. Higgins. And, I watched that play like 4 or 5 times, like right in a row. I just had all the televisions right there, and it was just boom, 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 boom. And every time my thought went, wow, that was a terrible play call, to, oh, that was a not a terrible play call, pretty understandable play call. Oh, Michael Walker was supposed to cover. Oh, no. Michael Walker ran to the wrong spot, decided he was going to go where a cornerback was, and then go back to where he was supposed to cover, which is where T. Higgins was, and then eventually scored a touchdown. How much confidence do you have in him and probably Miles Jack starting the rest of the season? How massive of a loss is this for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, I thought Miles Jack was not bad. Like, I thought
No,
he played a pretty solid game, which I think softens the blow, but only a little bit. Because, I mean, for a while there, you were thinking, okay, Miles Jack is back. Miles Jack can do some things. And Landon Roberts is still there. Like, as long Landon Roberts is like, he was the glue holding this thing together by a thread. And I don't know if it'll fall apart. I mean, I think Miles Jack, because of his experience, especially with this team, and clearly still has some legs on him. He didn't look like there was a ton of rust. I think he can maybe serve the same role, but man, like, you lose a Landon Roberts, who had obviously been playing really well, and then obviously holding everything together. Like, I don't know. It's again a crushing loss. Like you said, the worst one that they've had to face among the litany of injuries that they've had at inside linebacker.
Yep.
And it's just crushing. I think, like Miles Jack and Landon Roberts could have been something. Like, you could have really felt really comfortable going in to these last 2 games of the year, which are going to be like really, really good running offenses with Kenneth Walker, and then obviously everyone that the Baltimore Ravens have on offense, and just like how they attack you. I like, it's going to be crucial to have these inside linebackers there, just supporting in the run defense and keeping everything kind of in check. And just, it's all, as far as the physical stuff, like, that's a huge blow because Landon Roberts was a good player, but you just feel like you lose so much in terms of communication and leadership that you can't make up in 2 weeks. You can't make up with Miles Jack, a guy who just hasn't been there for what are we in, week 16? Yeah, hasn't been here for 15 weeks. So
I agree. It's a tough spot to be. It's the toughest spot to be for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I will say that if Miles Jack didn't come back, and he said after the game, he was like, look at the groin injury last year, which, I knew what he was playing through. He was playing through a fully torn groin. Like, it probably should have underwent surgery, probably should have ended his season. He decided to push it out because they were pushing for the playoffs. I give him a ton of credit for that one. He struggled, and he admitted that he was struggling at the end of last season, but he said that the groin injury played a pretty significant role. I think he comes back, and like, this is a guy that the Steelers looked at as a starter last season. Hopefully he can fill that role. I feel a lot better with him out there. I still think you need something. Like, you need something out of Michael Walker or Mark Robinson, who I thought Mark Robinson, I mean, very minimal role on defense, but he came up with some good tackles. Like, there were a couple of times where I was like, dude, look at Mark Rob hitting a hole. Good for him. The development started to be there. I don't know if it continues. Might have just been a good game, but it was a positive. Blake Martinez, hopefully something. I don't know. I also liked the Miles Killebrew kind of going down in the box in that 3 safety set a lot. I think that could be a way to work around it, but you got to find a way, because this is as big of a blow as it comes. Hopefully Miles Jack can call the defense, but you literally lost in back-to-back weeks. You lost Minkah Fitzpatrick, who would have been your backup play caller on defense, and Landon Roberts, who is your starting play caller on defense. And you're now going to rely on Miles Jack, who is technically a practice squad guy, who's probably going to get elevated the next 3 weeks. I mean, he's probably going to get signed to the 53-man roster after, or if Landon Roberts goes on IR. But that's a guy that, up until, 4 weeks ago, was sitting on a couch, driving an airplane, watching some hockey. Like, he was not learning the playbook. It's a very, very tough spot to be. I don't know. I mean, you could say it was a good game, and I think it was a great game, and I'm not trying to downplay the game. Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks offense and Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens offense are going to be a bit more of a challenge than Jake Browning and a beat up Cincinnati Bengals offense. So I don't know what my expectations are, but I'm worried. Definitely worried. We'll see what happens there. Like I said, more news will come and the Steelers will make some decisions on all that stuff. So we'll probably have more to talk about throughout the week. That being said, it's Monday. We skipped this last week because at that point we were dead. The Steelers season was over. There's nothing worth talking about. I wouldn't ask this question to anybody at all because I know the answer would just hurt to come out. But they're back. Playoff odds increased to a solid, I think it was 11% after that game, which is way better than the 3% they were looking at heading into it. They got 2 more games. They travel to Seattle, then they travel to Baltimore. They could face a Baltimore Ravens team that has nothing worth playing for at that time, so maybe they get some backups. Great game against Cincinnati. The best game of the season, hands down. Where do you stand with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now? Do you think they have any shot to put themselves in contention for the playoffs? Obviously, you cannot control what other teams are going to do. They need some help. That would take forever to dive into. They have to win out. That's step one. How much faith you got in these guys to pull it together and get 10 wins on the season? Like, you think about it, they win these last 2 games, they get 10 wins on the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have a lot more confidence in them now than I did, before this game started.
Yes.
But I don't know. I feel like anything can happen with this team, and I just feel like they had, call it Christmas magic, call it, Mason Rudolph stepping in and saving the day. Maybe George Pickens can't be this motivated all the time. Like, who knows? You're not going to face this beat up of a team every week, but I don't know. I feel like I walk away with confidence. Like, I feel, I don't know. I call me being a victim of the moment, but I feel like they kind of have something with Mason right now. I feel like they at least have some lightning in a bottle with him. There's a connection with George Pickens. There's an understanding of the offense. There's a chemistry there with everyone that just works. The offensive line was also clicking today in a way that went.
They look good.
I think, that went underrated. And so I think that it's absolutely within their control to win out. I don't think that Seattle team is wildly impressive. I think they're just as inconsistent as the Steelers team. Just kind of in the same realm of talented, but a lot of holes and just inconsistent. And then, like you said, like the Ravens, who knows what they're playing for at all, in week 18. I kind of suspect that this is a team who is really taking care of business all year long. I expect them to continue to do that to the point where they don't have to kind of sweat out that last week of the year, and they can lock up that 1 seed in the AFC before the Steelers get to Baltimore in week 18 at the beginning of January. So I'm pretty encouraged. I actually really think that there's a strong chance that they will win out. I'm going to go from complete defeatist to optimist in 1 week, but I'm riding the high right now, and I think that they have a great chance of finishing this season strong and getting Mike Tomlin another winning season and giving themselves the best shot possible to clinch that playoff spot.
I think I agree, and it's a tough place to be, and I won't lie to you. I think, next week we could be looking at this and saying it's all over, but Mason is the reason that I feel confident in this, and that is just because I don't think Cincinnati's defense was the best defense in the world. I don't think that they're anywhere near the challenge that the Baltimore defense is. I mean, they're not anywhere near the challenge that the Baltimore defense is, but I don't really know if Seattle's defense is, as matched up as every other defense that they've faced this season. I just think Mason looked like a vet. I think Mason looked comfortable enough that you give a team a shot on a week-to-week basis, and if he can continue to play like that, I don't see why you can't win football games. The Steelers are a talented group. They have a lot of injuries, but they're very talented. The thing is that they just haven't put it on the field, and there's been a lot of pieces that haven't put it on the field, but when one piece clicks, and they've seen this throughout the season, when one piece clicks, it just sets off every other piece. If the run game's going, the passing game is going a little bit. If the passing game's going, the run game's going a little bit. If the offense is clicking, the defense is clicking. Like, that's just it's a domino effect. It's one feeds off of the other, And when nobody's feeding off of anybody, everybody stinks. And we've seen that a number of times. We haven't seen it more than maybe 2 or 3 where the offense is clicking and the defense and everybody else around it goes, all right, well, let's do this. Let's just have a good time and let's see if we can win a ball game. I think that's what Mason Rudolph brought to this team this week. Again, I don't know if it happens again, but if you ask me today, yeah, I don't understand. I don't know why you would say the Steelers couldn't ride this high and give themselves an opportunity to get into the dance. And they had 3 really bad games, 3 really defeated moments. But, and as cliche as this sounds, and we were actually joking about it before the game, this is a moment where if you're going to pick any coach in the NFL, Mike Tomlin comes in pretty clutch in these types of moments. And I'm not saying that's the reason that they're going to win. I'm just saying that he's got something about him that tells you, hey, look, you're going to get real fired up for these last 2 games. And I don't know, it could be a dogfight. Like you could win a game you could win these last 2 games 10-7, and we could be looking at these guys and saying, oh, they're going to get smoked in the first round of the playoffs. But there's something about a moment like this where you just kind of say, yeah, Mike Tomlin gives you like a little bit of something where, you could do enough. And I think that's all you need to do right now is enough. I think the Steelers got the spark that they needed. Can they ride it? Who knows? But I am certainly not dead on this team, and I was very, very dead on it 3-4 days ago. Like super beyond the season's over, shut it all down, dead. And here we are. Things are looking good. So we'll see what happens. With that said, we're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast and find all of our work at allsteelers.com and our pick coverage at InsideThePanthers.com. I hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday. We will see you on Wednesday. Peace.